What's going on, everybody? It's AG here. I think we are officially live. All right. So tonight, I'm going to let a few more people get in before we get started. But what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking G5 teams that can make the college football playoff. So with that, we're talking, non-power teams. So teams that aren't in the Big 10, teams that aren't in the Big 12, teams that aren't in the ACC, teams that aren't in the SEC. So anybody that's not in that qualifies for the list. Now, what we're going to be doing, I'm going to go through my list. I'm going to go through your list. All right. So I asked you guys on Twitter. I asked you guys in the Discord chat. I asked you guys in the community. I asked you guys on Bleacher Report. What are some of the teams that you think can make the playoffs? So we're going to look at your comments. I'll talk about those a little bit, and we'll talk about mine. But before we do that, thanks for joining. Get your popcorn ready. Get whatever you need. Get your drink, whatever. We're going to be here a while. All right. I got it along. As long as y'all want to stay on, I'm going to be here. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started a little bit. But before we get into it, have you guys been keeping up with any NBA free agency stuff? I know I don't usually talk basketball on here, but there's been some big NBA free agency news today, like in yesterday. Klay Thompson going to the Dallas Mavs. That's a big one. Paul George going to the Sixers probably. I don't think it's confirmed just yet, but I think it's definitely going to happen most likely. All right. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started. While we're going along, though, if you're watching this on replay, if you're watching this live, join me down in the comments. Let me know who you think can make the college football playoff out of the G5 teams. What we're going to do first, we're going to look at the polls I did, and then we'll look at your comments that you sent in. We'll kind of go back and forth like we did on my last live stream, looking at yours, looking at mine, going back and forth. All right. So first up here, this is a poll taken from YouTube, ours from the community. I asked you guys which G5 conference gets a team in the college football playoff, and which team is it? So in the lead right now is the Mountain West. All right. So that being, Boise State's conference, that's kind of the leading candidate there. Second place, you've got the American Conference at 30%. So that being, Memphis, Tulane, UTSA, USF. That's another one that a lot of people have thrown in. Then 15%, we've got Conference USA or MAC. So that's talking Liberty. Liberty, was really good last year, went undefeated. Then we're talking the MAC. Not too many teams out of there that are usually talked about, but, Miami of Ohio, Toledo are teams that you could see making it there. Then in the Sun Belt at 10%, that is Appalachian State, Texas State, James Madison. So teams of that nature. But y'all voted, Mountain West won that one. All right, next up, which G5 conference gets a team in the college football playoff, and which team is it? This is from Twitter. Surprisingly here, Mountain West is 0%. So a little opposite of, what the other one was. Because with the other one, Mountain West was pretty heavily in the lead. But here, three-way tie, believe it or not. I don't know how we got this vote here, but 33% American, Sunbelt, Conference USA, or MAC, all tied there at 33%. I would probably lean towards American, but we'll get to that whenever we get to my list. But let's go ahead and jump into your guys' comments. We'll take a look at these. All right, let me get here. All right, so we'll go through about 3 pages of y'all's, then we'll look at mine. All right, so I had about 11 or 12 teams. Surprisingly, in the Bleacher Report app, we got a ton of feedback, on multiple teams. All right, so here, Brennan says Boise State, Appalachian State, or James Madison. Boise State and Appalachian State are on my list. Spoiler alert. James Madison, they're not on my list right now. It took a lot of turnover from last year. They were really good last year, made the top 25 at some moments towards the end of the year, but they lost almost their entire roster and their entire coaching staff. Kurt Cignetti gone to Indiana, took a lot of the roster with him. Their quarterback, Jordan McLeod, went within the conference to another team we'll talk about later. And believe it or not, Magic Man just brought up the team. GJ Kinney, we trust, he says. So James Madison's quarterback, Jordan McLeod, actually went to Texas State, where GJ Kinney is the head coach. So with that, I think James Madison's going to take a little of a step back, and then Texas State will probably take a little bit of a leap forward. And we'll get to Texas State a little more whenever we get to my list. But as of right now, Brennan throws out these 3 teams right here. Magic Man, what's going on, though, man? And if you're just joining us, let me know down in the comment section which G5 teams you think can make the college football playoff. What we're looking at right now is the submissions you guys put in on Bleacher Report, on Twitter, in the community. We're going to go back and forth from y'all's list to my list, kind of like we did the other night. But this is the first comment we've looked at so far. All right, next up, we've got San Diego State. That's coming from Classic. So San Diego State is where I can't think of his name off the top of my head. But sorry, I'm laughing in the comment section here. But San Diego State, they had the coach from, he was Colorado's OC this past season. What is his name? It's going to bother me. Let me look this up because it's really going to bother me real quick. Because he was the head coach somewhere else not too long ago. And then Sean Lewis, there we go. That's the thing I'm thinking of. Kent State head coach. And then, I don't know, they were pretty bad last year. All right, really bad, actually. And then how is Sean Lewis going to look? Yeah, RIP to GJ Kinney's dead. Sort of. I don't know. Is he dead? I don't know. That's news to me. I don't know. But RIP. All right, back on track. Sorry, Magic Man distracted me. But Classic says San Diego State. All right, I'm kind of hesitant to say they're going to be a playoff team. That's a really big jump, I think, despite even if he is a pretty good head coach. Because even if he's a good head coach, making that quick of a jump that quick is going to be pretty tough, because he kind of got ran out of Colorado. That situation's weird. I thought it was a good hire whenever they brought him in as OC, but, the way it worked out, they weren't very good. He ended up getting his offense coordinator title stripped, but he's proven, when he was at Kent State that he can be a pretty solid head coach, I would say. So I think give him some time at San Diego State, and I think they'll be pretty good. But this year, I think that might be a little bit too much of a jump, probably. All right, next up here, we've got from UO. He says, we need to end Boise State's run early. Okay, so this is coming from an Oregon fan, by the way, just to give you a little context here. We need to end Boise State's run early this year. Nothing against them, but they are in our way. So that's referring to Boise State as being widely heralded as the sleeper this year, the team to make the college football playoff out of the G5 teams. They do play Oregon, so that's what he's talking about here. He's saying they're going to end that run early. Nothing against them, but they're in their way. So I think even with a loss to Oregon, Boise State would be fine. Now, if they just get blown out of the water, definitely not. But if they can keep it somewhat competitive, if they can play with them, keep it within, I would say 3 scores, keep it under 20. I think that's actually a resume booster, believe it or not, even though it's a loss, because Oregon should be good, according to all the Oregon fans. All right, let's see. Next up here, we've got Matt. All right, he says Boise State, Liberty, Texas State, and there's another that I'm blanking on. I can't remember who he's. I don't know if he put in who he's blanking on. I guess we'll find out later. But Boise State, we just touched on them. I think they will be improved. They're going to be good. They were pretty last year. They were kind of iffy. They lost 7 or I think they lost 6 games at the beginning of the year, and then kind of went on a run towards the end of the year to really bounce back. I think they ended up going 7-6 or something. Went on a run to their championship, but how are they going to look this year? They've got Ashton Jeanty back at running back. He's going to be I wouldn't say Heisman level, but he's definitely an All-American type candidate. And then as far as Liberty is concerned, we saw them last year, really good offense, Caden Salter, Quinton Cooley, really nasty backfield. I think they led the NCAA in rushing, actually, believe it or not. And then their coach, Jamie Chadwell, he's proven, whether it's here or Coastal Carolina, he can win wherever he goes. And then Texas State, so we just talked on them a little bit. Magic Man talked about GJ Kinney. So with Texas State, not only are they improved, they were pretty good last year in year 1 under GJ Kinney, but bringing in Jordan McLeod, which he won Sunbelt Player of the Year last year, I believe, on offense, bringing him in is definitely going to help them. And then with bringing him in, their offense is going to be super explosive. And then in addition to that, we'll look at their schedule a little bit later, but it's very manageable. There's no reason Texas State probably can't go undefeated, to be honest with you. All right, so moving right along here, Jody says Tulane. All right, so getting our first mention of Tulane tonight. Tulane, all right, they lost their head coach. Willie Fritz is gone to Houston. All right, they bring in John Sumrall from Troy as their new head coach, and they've got some talent. All right, they've got a running back, Mekhi Hughes. He's arguably a top 10 running back in the nation. At quarterback, you've got Ty Thompson coming over from Oregon, so that offense is going to be talented. John Sumrall's won a lot of ball games at Troy. So how is he going to translate? How quickly is he going to win at Tulane? He really doesn't have to rebuild too much because it's not like, Willie Fritz just completely took his roster from Tulane to Houston. That didn't happen. So the roster's there. Now, they're not as good as they were last year, but the roster's there to be good pretty quick. Scotty King. Memphis still loves Dan Lanning. Oregon, y'all should say thank you. Dan blew up while here in Memphis as a coordinator. That's right. He was a coordinator at Oregon. We were just talking about Oregon a little earlier in reference to Boise State. I know we've got a lot of Memphis on here, but I haven't seen any just yet really talking about Memphis. All right, so next up we've got, let me move my head out of the way. There we go. All right, so Coral says, so hard to keep track of who's in what conference now. Maybe Washington State or Oregon State, since they will be cleaning up in the Mountain West. So before we talk about Washington State and Oregon State, the Pac-12 dissolved. Our Pac-12 is gone. We know that. I looked it up a little bit because I wasn't 100% sure if, one second, guys. I'm trying to open this freaking drink over here. I wasn't sure if Oregon State or Washington State could make it as a G5 representative. So it turns out they can't. Okay. I thought they might be able to, but with the way it plays out, they're actually just going to have to make it as an at-large because technically to qualify, you have to win your conference championship to be an automatic qualifier. And they don't play in their conference championship because they're kind of playing a half schedule. They're playing, I think, each other, which is technically the Pac-12 game. And then they're playing Mountain West teams to kind of round out their schedule, but they're not eligible for the Mountain West championship. So technically, Washington State and Oregon State would just have to be at-large teams. So they would have to go undefeated and basically run the gauntlet of everybody they're playing, make it as an at-large team. So with that, they probably have to be undefeated. So probably not happening, although it would be nice to see the Pac-12 make it, like that. All right. B says, don't know who it will be, but the 5 seed will win the championship. Okay, that's pretty ballsy there. So he's saying whoever makes it is going to lose to the 5 seed, and whoever that 5 seed is going to win the national championship. So basically it's going to be from a non-conference champion is what he's saying. So that could be anybody. You don't know who that's going to be, but he's saying whoever wins the national championship isn't going to be somebody that won their conference. All right, Shelton says James Madison. So another James Madison reference here. We talked about James Madison a little bit earlier. Lose a lot from their team last year, coaching staff, roster. So they're pretty much an overhaul this year. They could shock me, but they're not on my list. All right, we'll do one more page, then we'll jump back into mine. All right, Jay says it'll probably be Liberty or whoever comes out of the Mountain West. Okay, so Liberty, really good last season. They've got a lot of guys coming back. As far as the Mountain West, you got Boise State, you got Fresno State, you got UNLV, a few other teams in there, but those are probably the 3 that could make it out of there. All right, and Guy says hopefully none. Well, unfortunately for Guy, somebody's got to make it. So, all right, let's jump back into my list real quick. All right. Oh, where'd it go? Hit the wrong button. My bad, guys. Let me pull this thing back up. There we go. Not very tech savvy, if you can't tell. All right, so first up here, we've got Appalachian State. So these are in alphabetical order, no particular order, by the way. But why can they make the college football playoff? Why Joey Aguilar is the main reason. Pictured here, their quarterback, really good player. All right, he has done a lot of damage. Let me pull up his stats for you guys real quick. He's a really good ball player. All right, not only has he won a lot of ball games, he's put up some impressive numbers along the way. Let me pull up these stats again for you. There you go. All right, so last season, all right, so for example, take a look down here let's look at the tougher competition here. North Carolina, all right, lost in double overtime, but he had 2 touchdowns, all right, threw for over 275 yards. Some other big games, all right, he also can run the ball a little bit, all right, 42 rushing yards against them. Other big games, all right, let's see, he threw for almost 400 yards against Southern Miss. All right, so he's a pretty good player, all right, and Appalachian State's usually pretty good. I think we had a lot of submissions talking about Appalachian State. We'll get about them in a little bit as far as, all the comments. But they also have a lot of other returning starters. So not only Joey Aguilar, but they have a ton of other returning starters that should kind of bolster that team. They were really good last season. In addition to Joey Aguilar, they had a lot of success just in terms of winning ball games. And they kind of play an improved schedule. We'll look at their entire schedule here in a second. But their tougher games they do play. All right, they play at Clemson. So that one's obviously going to be tough at the beginning. So with that, I don't think you got to necessarily win that game. But if you can keep it tight, kind of like I said earlier with Boise and Oregon, if you can keep it within like 21 probably, that should be probably a good loss, but you've got to hope that Clemson goes on a run and makes the college football playoff would be your hope. That would make that loss look a lot better. They play Liberty, so that's kind of a good matchup there between two of the better G5 schools in general. And then James Madison is an in-conference one. They avoid Texas State. All right, now let me pull up their schedule. First off, though, let's look at their transfer portal they've got coming in. All right, so they had some nice pieces from Power 4, Power 5 schools. All right, you've got a tackle coming from Auburn, cornerback coming from Illinois, another tackle coming from Louisville, a D lineman from NC State. So anytime you can really, in my opinion, with these G5 schools, if you can shore up defensively and skill position wise, obviously adding P5, P4 talent is awesome. But whenever you can shore up that O-line and D-line, P4 and P5 player-wise, that really shows that I think you can play, with the power schools once you get there to make it a little more competitive. They also bring in a D tackle from USC, safety from Syracuse, wide receiver from Louisville. So as you can see, they're bringing in a lot of Power 4 talent here. D tackles from Virginia Tech and Florida State. So they've added a lot of dudes in the portal that should help them out. And then looking at their schedule, obviously we touched on Clemson. That one's going to be tough. All right, East Carolina is going to be improved, so that one's not going to be easy by any means. South Alabama, they should beat them, no problem. Then we get to Liberty. Liberty was really good last year, but they didn't play anybody. So that one's almost a coin flip. I think those are two of the top 5 teams probably G5 was. And so that should be a pretty awesome matchup to see. But the rest of the games they shouldn't have a problem with because, again, I think James Madison's probably going to take a step back, but then again, they might not. There's really no telling. All right, we got a few comments here. Let's see. Scotty says, Boise, Memphis, Tulane, Texas State, only 4 worthy based on strength of schedule. Okay. So, yeah, strength of schedule plays a lot into it because that's what I've talked about previously, like with Liberty getting beat last year by Oregon. Like, is that going to hurt them as far as looking at this season? Is that going to hurt their chances? Because we've seen they can't compete with those teams. So, looking at like these schools you're talking about, Boise, Memphis, Tulane, they all play they play a Power 4, Power 5 school in the non-con, so that should help them out a little bit. Like even if they can lose, like I said, if they lose it, but they only lose by 21 or something, that's not a bad loss necessarily. Fresno, yeah, we might talk about them in a little bit. They might have made my list, no spoilers, but probably on there. USF does play Bama, that's right, yeah. So they kind of gave them a scare last year, if you remember that. They kind of played with them a little bit, so can they do it again? I don't know. It's a solid pick right there, Scotty. We might be talking about East Carolina here in a little bit too. I like it. All right, so let's go back to your guys' comments real quick, and then we'll jump back into mine. There we go. We got a Memphis mention here. Brett says Memphis. All right, Memphis, we've touched on them a little bit. We'll talk about them a lot more once we get to them on my schedule. As of right now, they are my pick to make the college football playoff out of the G5. I believe they're Scotty's pick as well. I think we have a couple comments from him on here. We'll look at it a little later, but Memphis is loaded, and they kind of showed last year that they can play with these teams. They got the Iowa State, play with them in the bowl game. So, like, they can play with a tough Power 5 school. They've proven that. And so, with what they have coming back, I think they're going to be the real deal this year. All right, then Bodie says Liberty University getting a little more love. Magic Man says, let me hear it. C-Town what? C-Town what? Who's C-Town, Magic Man? I don't know what school you're referencing. Is that Clemson? Clemson what? All right, next up, I always got some more Liberty love here. Jay says Liberty. All right, Joel. All right, here we go. We got another team now. Possibly Air Force makes the playoffs and wins their opening round game. Wow, okay, so Joel's getting really bold here. Air Force was really good last year. All right, their coach, Troy Calhoun, he's kind of one of the more underrated head coaches, I would say. Looking at his history as a coach, he's won a ton of ball games. Let me actually pull this up for y'all while we're on this because he's actually really impressive. Like, he's probably in my top 25 coaches in the country, but he doesn't get talked about a lot. But looking at his history, let me pull this up for you guys. So looking at his history right here, all right, if you can see the W's and L's right here, all right, so he has a ton of double-digit win seasons at Air Force, all right? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 double-digit win seasons. Now, I realize he's been there a long time, but look at, he barely has any losing seasons here. Like, even on a bad season, he's probably winning 8 or 9 games. So, Troy Calhoun really slept on, but with what Air Force lost from last season, last year, They were, I think they made the top 25 at the beginning of the year, and then they kind of just slowly started dipping back, you know. But they lost, I think, their entire roster, so I probably don't see that happening this year. Oh, this one, my bad. Yeah, C-Town what? Try, baby. All right, Lewis says UTSA or Tulane. All right, so getting a little more Tulane love here. UTSA, I think that's the first they've been mentioned tonight. They might be on my list. They kind of went back and forth on because they've been really good, but they lose a ton from these past few seasons. Like they've won a lot of ball games, but they've lost their quarterback Frank Harris. He's kind of been there for this run with Jeff Traylor. So are they going to take a step back with him finally graduating? You know, probably a little bit, but they bring in some nice portal talent. That's for sure. All right, Trent says, why even have a G5 team in the playoffs? NCAA will never let them win a chip. All right, so with that being said, I mean, I don't know. There's kind of depends on probably who the 5 seed is going to be. You know, if they can get a good matchup, I could definitely see them winning the first round. You know, maybe even going on a little bit of a run. I think there's a few comments in here from Bleacher Report that and the community that have predictions for teams beating the 5 seed. We'll get to those when we get there, but I mean, we just had one from the guy that was it named Joel that talked about Air Force. He said he thinks they'll win the first round game. So I mean, it's definitely possible, but you're going to have to get a favorable matchup. Like if you get a maybe like a Florida State last year, you know, you could dip them maybe. All right, Wyatt says Liberty, Liberty getting a little more love. Liberty, Liberty. All right, going back to mine here. Liberty, Liberty. All right, it's stuck in my head now. All right, next up we have Boise State. All right, so again, these are in alphabetical order, no particular order. Boise State, out of the Mountain West. Why can they make the college football playoff? Well, in particular, Ashton Jeanty. All right, their running back pictured here. Like I said, he's kind of an all-American type guy. He's going to put up some serious good numbers. And they started really slow last year. I mean, they started the season slow, fired their head coach, promoted a guy within to be the interim head coach, and went on a run to the Mountain West Championship. That coach, Spencer Danielson, is the head coach now. So obviously they liked what they saw when they made that run. They bring in a nice transfer portal class. We'll look at that in a minute. Headline, though, by Malachi Nelson, our former 4-5 star out of USC. He didn't quite get there at USC. He was kind of, you know, seen as the guy behind Caleb Williams. He got jumped by Miller Moss, obviously. But with him taking the reins at a Boise State, now it's kind of been rumored that he hasn't been named the starter just yet. So there's still, you know, the jury's still out, I guess, on how he's going to look this year at Boise. But if he can look good, if he can finally reach that 4 or 5 star caliber, they're going to be pretty good and a team to mess with, you know, because the way they went on that run at the end of the year, they're capable of beating a lot of teams. All right, the toughest games at Oregon, at UNLV, and Oregon State. Now, that last one, I don't know how tough it'll be, but since they've been a Power 5 school, I kind of gave them a little credit. UNLV, all right, especially with that one being away, is going to be kind of tough. We'll talk about UNLV a little later. But at Oregon, that is the game everybody's talking about. Boise State was. Can they play with Oregon? And I really don't know if they can because, like I said, they weren't just great last year. They lost 6 games, I think. We'll look at their schedule. Let me pull that up actually while we're talking about it. You know, they lost a lot of games to start the year. Now, again, they went on that run at the end of the year, but with how it started, you know, are they going to go revert back to that? You know, I mean, they didn't play the toughest. I mean, they didn't play the easiest competition. Excuse me. Lost to Washington pretty badly. Washington made the national championships. That's not a bad loss. Lost to UCF. UCF's not terrible, so that's not a bad loss. And then looking at the rest of their losses, I mean, a loss to Memphis by 3. Memphis is a good football team. The worst one here is probably Colorado State. But, I mean, the rest of them here aren't terrible, you know. All right, and then looking at the schedule this year, all right, Oregon, like I just touched on. Other than that, though, there's not too many games they're just going to struggle with. Like UNLV is going to be tough because it's away. But other than that, though, I really don't see them losing any games. UNLV and Oregon are kind of the matchups. And if they can keep it tight with Oregon, like I said, mainly within, you know, 21, I would say you're probably going to be okay, more than likely. But let me pull up their schedule for you real quick here. I just did it again, didn't I? My bad, guys. I'm struggling here tonight. There we go. All right. Let me pull up their transfer portal class for you guys. I don't know why this is being a pain in the butt today. Didn't do this last time. All right, here we go. All right, so these are the transfers they've got coming in. All right, like I said, headlined by Malachi Nelson, former 4 or 5 star out of USC. They also bring in receiver from Indiana, corner from Cal, tight end from LSU. So they're bringing in corners and particular skill guys that can kind of give Malachi Nelson some weapons outside, power 4, power 5 talent that can kind of run. Probably going to be a little bigger, can go up and get the ball for him. They're bringing in power 4 corners to log down some guys. And with Ashton Jeanty and Malachi Nelson, they should be a pretty nasty duo. All right, Scotty says, playing Conference USA Sunbelt type schedules up to FCS. If you don't make reservations at the big boy table, then you deserve to starve. I would agree with that one. So that was kind of the jury out on Liberty last year. It was like they didn't play anybody. So really, do they deserve to be in? Yeah, they went undefeated, but they're not playing anybody. So, do they deserve to get in over a team that scheduled a Power 4 conference team that lost to them? Like I know SMU had lost games, but still they at least scheduled those guys. So, should they get in over them? All right, here. I'm going slow tonight. My bad, guys. All right, next up, we've got East Carolina. All right, we'll do this one, then we'll go back to your guys. All right, so East Carolina, kind of a sleeper. It might be a little bit of a stretch for them to make the playoff, but because I know they were bad last year. Why can they make it? In particular, the transfer portal. We'll look at that here in a second, but they have absolutely loaded up in the transfer portal, bringing in a ton of power conference guys to kind of replace that team they had last year, which was pretty bad. And again, the American Conference is up for grabs. SMU's gone. That's number one. Number two, Tulane's going to take a step back. Their head coach is gone, so they probably should take a little step back. UTSA, their quarterback is gone. So you really got, Memphis is going to be good. USF's going to be good. And then who else is coming to the table? Tulane and UTSA are probably still kind of up there, but who's next? I think East Carolina is going to take a jump. But in addition to this, I know they were bad last year. They still 5 one-score loss games. So they barely lost a ton of these games last year. So if they can just make up for those games, win those games they lost, they're going to make a huge jump. All right, their toughest games, Appalachian State, at Liberty, and UTSA. So a couple teams we've talked about, a couple teams we're going to talk about. They've got some tough games here. Appalachian State and at Liberty in particular are going to be tough, and those are both out-of-conference games. So they're scheduling, not power level out-of-conference games, but these are kind of as tough as it gets. Liberty and Appalachian State, 2 of the best teams in the group of 5. So they're scheduling them, playing some tough competition. But let me pull up East Carolina's transfer portal for you so you can kind of see what they're working with here. All right, so as you can see, they've got the 3rd-ranked transfer portal class in the American, and they're bringing in a ton of Power 4 skill guys that should help them out. Running back from Penn State, tight end from Ole Miss. They bring in a quarterback from Missouri. We'll look at him in a minute. Offensive lineman from Houston, safety from North Carolina, another tight end from Oregon, D lineman from Ohio State, Jake Garcia from Missouri. You might have heard of him before. Corner from West Virginia, guard from Florida State, DN from Louisville. So as you can see, they're loading up with guys from the Power 4, Power 5 conference. All right, now let me pull up their schedule for you real quick here. All right, so looking at their schedule. All right, first off, let's look at last year. All right, like I said, a lot of close losses. So they weren't just out of reach, Lost to Marshall. Marshall's not a great loss. Lost to Michigan. Michigan was a good football team last year. Obviously, they won the national freaking championship pretty dominantly. Lost to App State. That's a good loss. Lost to Rice by 7. That's not a good loss, but is at least close. Lost to SMU. SMU was good. Lost to Charlotte by 3. Lost to UTSA. Lost to Tulane by 3. So a lot of losses here, as you can see. But most of them that they lost big were to good teams. Now, it's not good to lose to anybody, but at least to the bad teams, they lost barely. And I know that's not necessarily a good thing to say, but with the changes they've had on the roster, I think they should take a huge leap this year. All right, so let's move back to your guys' list real quick. All right, we got a long one here. Let me get a drink. All right, here we go. All right, Liberty will go undefeated again, but here comes the question. How will the committee value, so this is what you're touching on earlier, I think, how will the committee value an undefeated Conference USA team that didn't play any Power 4 teams versus, let's say, an American Conference or Mountain West Conference teams that is 10-2 that played Power 4 teams? Good question, Vic. All right, so that's kind of what we touched on a little bit earlier. Now, 10-2, I don't know if it'll happen, but if they lose one game, like let's say Boise State loses to Oregon, or let's say Memphis loses to who are they playing? Tennessee, is that right? Let's say they lose to them, or no, Florida State. I'm sorry. Let's say they lose to Florida State. So with that being said, I would probably lean towards the power loss there. But what do you guys think on this in the comment section? Let me know. So you've got an undefeated Liberty, which didn't play any power conference teams, versus he says an American Conference or Mountain West Conference. So take Memphis and Boise State. If they were 10-2 but won their conference, who gets in? I think that would probably come down to, with Liberty in particular, they're at least playing Appalachian State this year, so that might help them out a little bit. If Appalachian State's good, But go back to, I don't know. I think if these teams have one loss, they get in over them, but two losses, I think that might be stretching a little bit. But if you can have a one-loss Boise with its loss to Oregon that wasn't by just 40 points, or a one-loss Memphis, I think that team's getting in over undefeated Liberty that didn't play anybody. All right, next up. All right, Cam. All right, I'll let y'all read this one while I'm getting another drink. That was a long one. All right, Cam says the American Conference because there's more possible victors. Memphis is the clear favorite. I would agree, but I wouldn't be surprised if Tulane, UTSA, or South Florida make a run. So we haven't gotten much mention of South Florida tonight. I think they're going to be pretty good though this season. They kind of gave Alabama a game last year. Now, was that a fluke? Possibly. That was when Alabama was really going through some stuff. But they returned almost their entire roster. Byron Brown, in particular, quarterback, is really impressive. And Tulane, the jury's out on them. I think they could be really good as well, but it's going to depend on Ty Thompson. Can he hit a quarterback? All right, Nicholas says Liberty. So Liberty getting a lot more love. Again, their backfield is really good with Cooley and Salter. All right, Helotos. I don't know if I'm saying this wrong, but Helotos says UTSA. All right, UTSA. We touched on them a little earlier. I think if they can find a good quarterback to replace Frank Harris, they should be okay. All right, Sean says Memphis or Liberty most likely. Those are probably kind of the two best teams right now, I would say. Having both their quarterbacks coming back in particular is going to be beneficial to both those teams. Scotty says y'all are sleeping on Rice. They're a dark horse. Glad they come to Memphis. Yeah, Rice has kind of been. It seems like they're on the come up a little bit. Obviously JT Daniels is gone. I don't even know how much he really played last year, but they could shock some people this year in the American because we kind of touched on it earlier. I think Memphis and Tulane are at the top, and then probably South Florida. But other than that, you've got like room for whoever to make a big jump in the American, I think. All right, Jacob says Tulane, they're sneaky good. All right, so they could sneak up on some people this year. I think they are widely known now, but with their coach being gone, with their quarterback Michael Pratt being gone, there might be kind of the jury's out on them, kind of like I am right now. So if they can, like I said, if Ty Thompson can hit, and we'll touch on them later, they're on my list. I think they could have this, I guess sneaky is the good season, All right, we'll go one more of y'all's, then we'll go to mine. All right, Glover says, put me down for Memphis with Tulane being a close second. All right, so he's got somebody out of the American coming, one of those two teams. Matt says Memphis as well. So again, Memphis getting a lot of love here, understandably so. That's right. I forgot EJ Warner went there. Yeah. So, yeah, he put up some good numbers at Temple then. All right. So, yeah, returning 22 starters is always a good thing, whether you were good or bad, because even if you were bad, you were young, you're bringing back 22 starters, then, you're going to be able to make some noise probably. Let me pull up Rice's schedule real quick. We'll look at them while we're talking about them. All right, so let's look at Rice last year. Lost to Texas. It's not a bad loss. Beat Houston. All right, so they kept it close with South Florida. Kept it close with UConn. I didn't realize how close they played with Tulane. Okay. And SMU. All right. Yeah, you might be on to something here, Scotty. Yeah, I didn't realize they played that tough with all those teams. Because really, besides UConn, not a bad loss on here. Tulane, SMU, South Florida, Texas, Texas State. And UTSA. Yeah. Not bad. Sam Houston, that's a win. Texas Southern, that's a win. They beat Houston last year, so I'm going to assume they're probably going to beat them again. Army, that should be a win. Charlotte, probably a win. So, yeah, this 3-game stretch right here and then these two. Yeah, so it's possible. Definitely possible. You're not wrong. All right, back to my list here. We have next up Fresno State. All right, Fresno State out of the Mountain West. Why can they make the college football playoff? In particular, Mikey Keene at quarterback. All right, pictured here, really good quarterback. All right, he can really air it out. And they have brought in a lot of power forward transfer portal talent on defense. We'll look at that here in a second. And the Mountain West, despite how, glorified Boise State is getting right now, how much love they're getting, I think it's still up for grabs. I mean, even with Boise State being the offseason winners, being the projection for a lot of people to make the playoff, with how good they were last year, even though they lost 6 games, it still should be wide open. Yeah, Mikey Keene used to be at UCF. Yeah, that's right. That's him. Same one. So yeah, he was solid at UCF and then transferred over to Fresno State. Crazy how many UCF quarterbacks are out there. You got him, you got Dylan Gabriel. There's another one I'm blanking on. All right, toughest games they have at Michigan. Okay, so there's your answer right there. We're going to know a lot about them pretty quick. When they go to Michigan, can they play with Michigan? I've had some people send in that might be on this one. That might have been on my bold predictions one, but somebody had Fresno State beating Michigan. That might be on this one. I can't remember. We'll see if it's on my community tab whenever we get to that. The comments y'all send in, but it might have been on the last one. So we're going to know a lot about them against Michigan at UNLV. So a couple teams playing at UNLV. That's probably good for UNLV, though, that they're hosting those games. You'd rather host those. And then at UCLA, so they avoid Boise State. UCLA should be a win, though. They're taking a step back. All right, so let me pull up their transfer portal class for you guys. See Mountain West and Fresno. All right, so I've got 7 commits, so not a huge class. That's why they're kind of lower on the rankings here, but bringing in a lot of dudes, okay? So in particular, where's he at? Corey Foreman. This guy right here, edge rusher from USC, at one point was a 5-star. All right, so he was the number 1 D lineman coming out of high school, but didn't do much at USC. So that's the reason he's a 4-star here. So they're loading up on the defense in particular, all right? At corner, they've got a corner coming in from Arizona State. They've got another D lineman coming in from USC. So I know USC's defense isn't heralded, as being superstar or nothing, but whenever you can bring in, like I said, power 4, power 5 guys to your G5 school, that's definitely a step up. And with that being said, they might tear it up in the Mountain West, because in particular, that one that was a 5-star with the Foreman, he might be able to take off at Fresno State. So that's kind of the talent they've got coming in. Now, let me pull up their schedule for you guys real quick. We'll look at that. All right, so we talked about that. They're going to play Michigan. Let's look at their schedule last year first off, though. All right, so last season, all right, they beat Purdue. That's a power win, but still not great. They beat Arizona State, blank them. So that's 2 power conference wins. That's actually a really good season right there, and let alone, even if those teams suck, anytime you can meet power conference schools, that's doing something good. All right, let's see. Lost to Wyoming. All right, Wyoming they were good last year. Let's go with that. All right. If it's lagging, by the way, sorry guys, this internet's a little spotty, to be honest with you. I know it kind of glitched last time during multiple times during the live stream. So hopefully it doesn't do it today. But if it does, my apologies. Should be getting some new internet, hopefully. Let's see. UNLV, they beat UNLV, beat Boise State, then lost to New Mexico, San Diego State. I don't know what happened in this 3-game stretch right here. That's tough. Lost 3 in a row right here. That's brutal. But looking at this year, all right, Michigan is not the same team they have been, okay? So with that being said, can Fresno State go out and beat them? I don't know. That might be a big stretch because we're going to Michigan. That's not going to be easy. Michigan, despite their losses, is going to be a tough out. There are a lot of people have them in the college football playoff. So I don't know if Fresno State can make that big of a leap and beat them, but hopefully they can give them at least a scare. All right, and then looking at these games right here, I think they should be able to win these games. No problem. They at least avoid Boise State. So I really don't see them running into too many issues here. Now, UNLV is not bad. Air Force and San Jose State weren't bad last year, but they're going to take a step back. So really, Michigan, UNLV, and what we talked about earlier, if they can just keep it fairly close with Michigan, that's going to look like a win if they can keep it within 21 points. And then UCLA, I think they can beat UCLA. UCLA is going to be really bad this year. I think, they lose Chip Kelly to Ohio State. They lose their quarterback room's gone. Their roster's pretty much gone. That should be a win there. All right, let's go one more on, then we'll jump back on yours. Okay, so now moving on to Liberty. All right, Liberty, one of the favorites. All right, they were the team out of the G5 last year to, make the New Year's Six Bowl. Why, though, in particular, Caden Salter, Quinton Cooley, their backfield is nasty. All right, they had the number one rushing attack in the nation last season, mainly because of those two guys. And then Jamie Chadwell as their head coach, we talked about him a little earlier. He's won a lot of ball games, all right, whether it's at Coastal Carolina, whether it's at Liberty, the dude's a winner. All right, there were rumors that he turned down an SEC job last year, in particular Mississippi State. That's kind of the rumor. And it would make sense. I could see why one of those schools would want him. All he's done is win. So, I figure he'll be in the Power 4, Power 5 eventually, but he's waiting out for the right job. Or he might just hold out at Liberty, just kind of run the G5. But wouldn't be surprised if he ends up at Florida one day. All right, and so their toughest games: East Carolina, at Appalachian State, and then Jacksonville State. That's going to be a conference game. Jacksonville State won double-digit games last year. Appalachian State, we already talked about. East Carolina, we already talked about. So those two games are going to be already better. Definitely Appalachian State. That game's going to be better than anybody they played last year, minus Oregon. So that's already going to improve their schedule if they can win that game. So let's look at their schedule a little bit. Pull this up real quick. Actually, first off here, let's look at their transfer portal class. They had a pretty nice class, I would say, on defense in particular, kind of where they need it. Because like I said, they've got the skill guys on offense already. They don't really need too much. But got D lineman coming from Wisconsin. So you can tell here they're bringing in power talent, UCF, Vanderbilt, NC State, Auburn, North Carolina, Louisville. So you can see a bunch of power schools here that they're drawing from. And they're also bringing in wideouts. So, like I said, they've got the quarterback and running back room handled. They're bringing in wideouts to kind of give him some more weapons outside to kind of let it rip a little bit. All right. Now let me pull up their schedule real quick for you guys. I know I'm moving slow today, man. I don't know why. All right, here we go. So their schedule this year. All right, Campbell, New Mexico State, UTEP, East Carolina. Now they play at Appalachian State, so that one's not going to be easy by any means because Appalachian State's pretty good. And especially, like I said, playing anywhere away is never easy by any means, and let alone when it's Appalachian State, which is actually a pretty tough team. That's already, like I said, better than anybody they played last year. Looking at their schedule last year, I forgot to do that, by the way. They don't have any tough games on here until they get to Oregon. There's nobody they really play that's even close to. Jacksonville State was the best team they played, and that's not even a great game. And that kind of showed against Oregon, But as far as their conference, though, really nobody besides Jacksonville State should give them a problem. And they handled Jacksonville State last year anyway, so I really don't see them running into too many issues to where, they should have much problems in the conference. All right, here, let me pull up y'all's again. All right, so moving right along with y'all's, Theodore says FIU. Okay, so FIU actually getting another team here. That might be a joke. I don't know, because I don't think FIU is going to be very good. I think they've been pretty bad last year. They've won barely any games the last few seasons. And I don't think they have much room or any reason for improvement, really. But I could be wrong. Let me pull up their schedule real quick. We'll take a look at it because I really don't know. All right, looking at their schedule, they play Indiana. Man, that's, I guess, winnable. Probably not. But let's look at how they did last year because I really don't know. Maybe North Texas, be UConn. All right. Lost to Liberty, lost to Jacksonville State, New Mexico State, UTEP. Yeah, don't know if I'm buying the hype on FIU, man. I don't know. That's the first time I've seen anything about them. I'm gonna probably go with no, because I mean, yeah, with how they've been lately, I think they've won like 4 games the last couple of years. I don't see it happening. All right, we got a long one here. Let's see. Let me take a swig before I read this one. Yeah, I think Middle Tennessee would be a little better too. They bring in what the heck's his name? Former Vanderbilt head coach. I can't think of his name right now. It's gonna bother me. All right, so we are on to y'all's comments again. Let me see. We got a long one here. All right, they won't let more than one crash the party. As to which one, I would have some usual suspects, but honestly, the Big 12 has raised a lot of the top G5 recently, so I don't even know anymore. Teams moving around too much. Maybe Oregon State, and that is Bleach sending that one in. So we touched on that a little earlier. As far as Oregon State is concerned, they technically would have to be an at-large to make it because they don't play in a conference championship game. Because technically they're in between conferences. You know, they're playing the Pac-12, but that's only one other team. So they're playing a Mountain West hybrid schedule. And with that, they're not eligible for the conference championship. So they would pretty much have to go undefeated and, you know, pretty much just run the table to even make it to where they'd be eligible for the playoff. And that's probably not going to happen because I don't think their schedule is very super manageable. Let's see. I mean, they play Oregon, so they're probably not going to beat Oregon. Now, if you can somehow only lose that game and then maybe lose the Boise, but you're going to have to beat Boise. If you can only lose to Oregon, you might can make it. But, I mean, it would have to be only Oregon because I don't even see, you know, if you lost to Oregon and Boise, you're definitely out. So you'd have to lose to just Oregon here if you're Oregon State. So, I probably don't see that one happening. And again, that would be – they'd be taking the spot of like a SEC or Big 12 team, so probably not. All right, Joe, all right, a little LSU slang here. Joe says Tulane. Scott says Memphis. All right, here we go. It's a little Scotty here. All right, Memphis has the most continuity of all successful winning G5s. That's the biggest point of why it's Memphis. So Scotty really emphasizes Memphis there. I think we might have a couple more. Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me all right? Let me check. Yeah, for some reason it was saying it went out. I don't know what's going on. My bad. But let's see. Yeah, Memphis should be a tough out for anybody, I think. All right. I think they're our next team we're going to talk about here whenever we go back over to mine. So we'll finish this page out on y'all's comments and then we'll look at mine. Let's see. I think that's it. Harry Leg, what's going on, man? Welcome. All right. All right. Next up on my list, we have Can y'all hear me all right, by the way? I think y'all can. Just for some reason it popped up that y'all couldn't hear me on my it said like mic muted on browser or something. So I don't know what's going on. If y'all can't hear me, by the way, let me know. But anyways, Memphis, all right, is like I said, my current G5 pick to make the college football playoff. Out of the American, why can they make it? Seth Hennigan in particular, quarterback. Look at his numbers here in a minute. He's going to put up All-American level numbers. And then they bring in some pretty solid transfers as well. So not only do they have a lot of guys coming back from last year to where they could make a run in the wide open American, but with the transfers coming in, I think they're going to be even better than they were last year, which was already pretty good. All right, then looking at their toughest games. All right, that first one's going to be tough. At Florida State, not going to be easy by any means, but as I've touched on already, I think if, you know, a little bit of lag, I appreciate you. All right, thanks, man. Yeah, I don't know. I like legit just moved a couple weeks ago to this new house, and I've been going off fiber until now. So this Wi-Fi is a little spotty here. Hopefully it's not too bad for you guys. Sorry. I'll try to get that fixed next time. But toughest games at Florida State, like I said, if you can keep it within 21, you're probably doing all right. At South Florida is going to be a tough out as well, and at Tulane. So having all three of those games away is going to make it a little more difficult. But if you can only lose to Florida State, I think it's going to be pretty solid. All right, let's see here. Let me pull up the transfer portal class for you guys. Sorry about the delay, guys. I'm trying to make sure all this crap's working. All right, so looking at the transfer portal class, all right, 30 transfers coming in. So as you can tell already, they're bringing in a whole lot of dudes from the portal to help this team. And the reason they're coming here is because they think they can win pretty good. But looking at their portal guys, all right, a lot of guys on defense that are definitely going to help out this team. All right, Indiana, Purdue, more Indiana guys, Tennessee. Let's see, another Indiana. Well, I get a lot of Indiana guys coming in. All right, offensive lineman from South Carolina, receiver from Houston, Louisville offense tackle, DN from Oklahoma. All right, so that's what I was touching on earlier, that anytime you can bring in like power dudes on the O-line and D-line, it's going to impact your game because that's going to help you kind of not only can you bully your guys, your conference, but it's going to help you out when you get to those other power schools because you're going to be able to play with them. All right, you're going to be able to play on the trenches with them, which is going to benefit you in the long run as the season moves along. What? I don't know why I got so many Indiana guys. They must have got an Indiana coach or something. I don't. I don't know. All right, let's look at their schedule. All right, so looking at their entire schedule, we already talked about their tough games, but last season they beat Iowa State in the bowl game. I know you can't take too much stock, of the bowl game, but that's still pretty impressive nonetheless. Lost by 4 to SMU. SMU was really good last season. Lost by 10 to Tulane. They beat Boise, beat South Florida. The main one, though, for me that I always harp back on is the 7-point loss to Missouri. Because Missouri, they would have been in the playoff if it was already 12 teams. So I'm not asking them to beat Florida State, but if you can just have a performance like this against Florida State, they're going to get in the playoff pretty much, But looking at their schedule this year, North Alabama, that's a win. Troy, that should be a win. Their head coach is gone to Tulane. Florida State, that's the big one. I think they can play with them. Now, will they beat them? Right now, I'm going to say yes, but Florida State is going to be pretty talented, so it's not going to be easy, especially playing away. Navy, that should be a win. I think they'll beat Middle Tennessee. And then playing again at South Florida, at UTSA, and at Tulane is not going to be easy. So I could see them losing one of those games. I don't think they will, but those are not going to be easy games by any means, particular South Florida and Tulane. All right, we got a couple comments. Let's see. Harry says Florida State will be in wounded animal mode after Georgia Tech beats them. All right, so hey, Georgia Tech could beat them. They're going to be nasty this year. Who they got? Haynes King back at quarterback. They were solid last year. Sandy says Colorado week 1, 8.5. Who does Colorado play week 1? I really don't know off the top of my head. I have to look. 8.5. Colorado over under. I'm gonna probably go under with Colorado, man. I don't know. Let's see. Let me pull up Colorado's. Oh, North Dakota State. Oh man. I think North Dakota State might beat them. I don't know. North Dakota State's usually kind of nasty, despite being a FCS school. I think they can beat them. I think Colorado will go under 8.5, though. I don't see them getting over that again. All right, moving back to your guys' comments again. All right, we got one here from Seth. All right, Seth says the American has the highest number of potential playoff teams. The challenge for Memphis, we just talked about this actually, is that they will be playing most of these teams on the road. So, yeah, they play Florida State on the road, play UTSA on the road, play Tulane on the road, play South Florida on the road. All those teams we're actually going to talk about here in a second. And if they're on this list, that means they have a chance to make the playoffs. So that's not going to be easy by any means. Harry, I agree. Colorado, yeah, it ain't happening. All right, RKB says Boise State getting a little more love. All right, we got our first Toledo mention tonight. All right, Toledo, I actually went back and forth about putting them on this list because their coach, Jason Candle, has done really good there. The problem is they lost their backfield from last year. Our DeQuan Finn, which if they brought their backfield back, they would be probably the favorite for me. They lost their quarterback though to Quan Finn to Baylor. Lost their running back. I think he might have ended up at Ole Miss. Penny Boone. He originally transferred to Louisville, but he got ran out because he didn't beat out the running back apparently during week 1. All right, Harry says USF as a veteran team. Yeah, they're going to be a tough out for anybody. I think they play a pretty tough schedule though because they play Alabama and can't remember off the top of my head. We'll talk about them in a little bit. They play somebody else besides Alabama too. It's going to be a tough one. I think it's Miami. I think. All right, Travis says Liberty, Tulane, maybe UTSA or Appalachian State. So yeah, we haven't seen too much Appalachian State love really, and now they play a tougher schedule. They play Liberty, they play Clemson, but I think Joey Aguilar is actually pretty impressive as a quarterback, and Appalachian State's always, kind of a sleeper. And could they, go on a run? Then like they're probably the team that has the most history of being a Cinderella. Like if they could somehow make the playoff, All right, Von D Gaming says those Bulldogs out of Fresno. Yeah, we'll get or did we already talk about Fresno? Yeah, we did talk about Fresno. Yeah, I've got them on my list, man. I think Mikey Keene is going to be good. I think they've got a good enough schedule, and that conference is wide open. I think that to where they could run the table and make it. I think because it's theirs for the taking as far as the conference. All right, Go says Miami. All right, so that's our first mention of Miami of Ohio. They are on my list. We'll talk about them. They might be next, actually, because we just talked about Memphis. But yeah, Miami of Ohio's got what you want to call it, Blaine Gabbert's brother. Yeah, Bondi. It's just not too far ago, really, because I've been going in alphabetical order. Shouldn't be too far ago. We talked about Fresno. All right, here we go. We got a long one here from Michael. None, a team or two may make the expanded playoff, but history has proven G5 teams don't have the depth to compete with Power 5 teams at a high level. So that is true, but I think the transfer portal has somewhat aided this problem, like to where, guys can, if they, like we talked about that guy earlier at, was it Fresno? I think it was Fresno. Excuse me. He was a former 5-star out of USC. Didn't get much playing time as he wanted at USC, so he transferred to, I believe, Fresno. And so you're going to see that a little bit. We talked about with a lot of these teams, like East Carolina, loaded up in the portal. That's the reason they're on this list because they've taken in Power 4 and Power 5 guys to where, in particular on the O-line and D-line and in the secondary, like they can match up with these schools speed-wise, power-wise. Now, obviously, these guys are transferring out for a reason because they weren't starting. So I'm not saying they're the caliber of these power schools, but, you might be able to build a team quick. But it's also tougher because if you have a really good guy at a group of 5 school, like look at Caden Salter at Liberty, for example. A lot of people thought he might transfer this year to Auburn because they can pay more, and you can transfer out like that. So transfer portal, I don't know, it can help, but it can also hurt the, group of 5 schools. All right, Scotty. All right, this specific one. All right, this is the one I was talking about earlier. I forgot about it. Texas loses to Memphis in the 5-12 matchup. So not only is Memphis making it, but they're dipping the 5 seed Texas. I could see it happening, with Texas, with the way they play, the way Steve Sarkisian coaches the second half. I could see that one happening. We got some Boise love here. Sarcasm. All right, so Matt says, too many Boise fans think it's 2008 all over again. 08 had a veteran NFL running back, unknown talent at quarterback, and a young, hungry team, but it's asking too much for 24 to replicate that squad. Yeah, I'm with you. I think they're going to be good, but making that big of a leap, going from, what were they, 7-6 last year, something like that, making that big of a jump that quick is going to be tough. Now, they're talented, yeah, and we'll see when they play Oregon, but I don't see it happening this year. But again, it's going to depend on what the rest of the schools do, because if a lot of schools, if everybody loses a game, somebody's still got to get in, so what's going to happen? All right, Jason says none. Well, somebody's got to get in probably. We had a lot of those. I guess people don't know the expanded playoff, but a lot of people said none. Tyler says Memphis or Appalachian State. Solid bets there. Again, if Appalachian State had a better schedule, I think they're actually super, super good, but their schedule's kind of tough. All right, let's go back to my list here. Next up, staying in the O's. All right, Miami of Ohio. All right, so this is one not many people are talking about. I think we've had one person comment about them. Out of the MAC, why can they make it? They've got Brett Gabbert at quarterback. All right, that is Blaine Gabbert's little brother. You remember him from Missouri. They had last year. They had a top 10 defense scoring wise. So they've got a lot of those guys back. Now, obviously, that was against their conference, not necessarily a power conference wise, but still a good defense nonetheless. And then also they bring in some good skill transfers. So with those skill transfers, if they can make an immediate impact, go ahead and start. And we'll look at them here in a minute. That's going to help out your defense and your offense. All right, Miami of Ohio, also their schedule is fairly manageable, at least at the beginning. All right, at Northwestern. Now, Northwestern was really good last year, probably like the most slept on 8-1 team last year. But they should take a step back. They lost a lot of guys. Cincinnati, I think Miami of Ohio beat them last year, actually, so they're going to beat them. Then at Notre Dame. So it'd be nice if that came down to like a playoff game right there. Them and Notre Dame, like losers out, winner gets in right at the end. All right, so let's look at we got a couple comments here. All right, Scotty says Boise, Houston, Central Florida, Utah, TCU, all G5 smacked some Power 5. Yeah, they did back in the day, or I say back in the day, it wasn't too long ago, I guess. Yeah, they all smacked around some teams pretty good. I mean, those Houston schools with Tom Herman, like they went on a pretty good run right there. They who'd they schedule? They beat somebody who was like a power school right off the bat. They kind of missed the boat on Houston being really good. If they could have capitalized on them when they had Ed Oliver and Tom Herman, they would have been pretty good. Talking about the Big 12, if they could have capitalized on that, got them when they had that group together. True, they were doubted. Yeah, you're right. So yeah, I mean, it could end up being somebody that's not even on this list. There ain't no freaking telling. All right, so let me pull up Miami's transfer portal for you guys. They're pretty low, but that's because of the number, not necessarily who they have coming in. But all right, so skill guys from the power conferences. You got Arizona State wide receiver, Indiana receiver, and a tight end from Florida State, running back from Purdue. So that's pretty much guys that can all start on your offense to give Gabbert some weapons out wide. Then you've got a DN coming in from Purdue, but we already said like their defense was pretty good already. So they really don't have to add that much defensively. But with these power skill guys coming in, it's going to give Gabbert a ton of weapons to kind of explode on that offense because their defense is going to be good already. So with what they're adding offensively, that should help the offense make a jump. Now, last year, Gabbert did get hurt, so take these scores from last year with a grain of salt. I think he got hurt in the Toledo game, if I remember correctly. But last year, they got beat pretty good, pretty handily by Miami, about 35. Beat Cincinnati, though, so that's a power win. Now, they lost to Toledo. We just talked about Toledo, what they had. Then they lost to Appalachian State, and that was it. So not any terrible losses. Now, Miami, if they were to, play a team like that again, I don't think they do this year besides Notre Dame and Northwestern. But if they could do that again, I said Notre Dame at the end of the season. That's at the beginning. I'm stupid. The way I had it worded, I was thinking they played them at the end. But if they could keep it competitive if they beat Northwestern, beat Cincinnati, and then barely lose to Notre Dame, that resume already with 3 power schools, even though Notre Dame's not necessarily a power school, if they can beat those 2 teams and lose to Notre Dame by, like I said, less than 21, as long as Notre Dame's good, that resume is probably the best we're going to see here out of these group of 5 schools. Now, unless, the American, all the teams end up being in the top 25, like 4 or 5 of them, then that might change some things. All right, so keeping up here, we've got John. He says Boise State. All right, then Miami says Liberty, Memphis, UTSA may have a shot in order of quarterback experience. So that was what I was saying earlier with Appalachian State, Memphis. They've got the quarterback experience that's going to help them a little bit, as well as Liberty. So Liberty, Caden Salter, Memphis, Seth Hennigan, and then UTSA. the jury's out on their quarterback. So that one, that's kind of their big question mark. UTSA, they lose a lot of guys from this run they've had the past few years, but if they can find a quarterback to kind of be the dude, they have some nice transfer portal dudes coming in on defense. All right. All right. Let's go back to mine real quick. Then we'll come back to this one. All right. Next up, we have South Florida. All right. So out of the American Conference, Byron Brown at quarterback. All right. He's good enough alone to beat half the teams we talked about. But in addition to that, total, they have 18 starters back. Okay. So offensively and defensively, they're returning a ton. I think it's 9 on each side, if I remember correctly. All the makings to win the American, which is pretty wide open. Schedule wise, though, they don't have an easy schedule. All right? They play at Alabama, they play Miami, they play Memphis. So, number one, at Alabama is going to be tough. That's difficult no matter what. No matter how Alabama looks, that's never going to be easy. And then Miami, all right, they're probably going to be the best they've been the past few years. Now, they're kind of always a question mark under Mario Cristobal, but they've got Cam Ward at quarterback. He's really going to test your defense out a little bit. And then Memphis, we talked about them earlier. Seth Hennigan's going to be good, and their team's going to be a threat anyway. All right, so let's pull up their schedule. We don't got to look at their transfer portal because they have a lot coming back. All right, so all 3 of those games are pretty towards the beginning of the year. South Florida, Miami, and Memphis. I forgot how bad they beat Syracuse in the bowl game. Let's see. They should have won that one. All right, BCU. So at Alabama, let's look at how they played with Alabama last year. All right. Now, for some reason, Alabama played at South Florida. I don't understand that one really. But if you can think back to that game, they almost beat Alabama. Now, I don't think they played Jalen Milroe in that game for whatever reason, but they almost beat Alabama. But this season, all right, to Alabama, how are they going to look without Nick Saban? Kalen DeBoer's coming in from Washington. You've got Jalen Milroe, quarterback. How are those two going to mesh? And then other than that, Southern Miss, they should beat them. All right, but if they can somehow beat Miami, or let's go down this route. If they lose to Alabama and Miami and then run the table in the American, do they get in if they can keep it close? I would say yes, probably. Now, that's assuming Miami is going to be good, but Alabama's probably going to be a top 15 team at worst. They're still probably going to be good for that. That's right. Yeah, they benched him after that loss to Texas. That's right. I don't know why they did that. But South Florida, though, if they can keep it tight with Alabama and Miami, those aren't bad losses. But the rest of the schedule, though, the American, even though it's wide open, it's going to be tough. So going from Miami, they do at least host Miami, so that's good. But playing at Tulane, that's not going to be easy. Playing Memphis, that one's going to be tough. Other than that, though, I think they can beat the rest of these teams on here. But that first 6-week stretch, that's kind of going to be the tell of their season right there. All right, here we go. Nathan. All right, he says, got to root for Appalachian State to make it. They would be the perfect poster child to hopefully cause chaos. Okay, so that's what I kind of talked about earlier with what their history is as far as being, the Cinderella of sorts. They've kind of got some history of kind of upsetting some teams, so maybe they could make a nice Cinderella run. All right, Chad says Charlotte is my sleeper pick. Charlotte, I think, does have some nice transfer pieces coming in. And they're in the American as well, so they might could move up the ranks. I don't know if they can quite win it this year, but I could easily see them being a top 5 American team if all falls right. Our Metallica says none. All right, so we've got another person who said none. Jacob said Appalachian State, and then Fez says Fresno State. So Fresno State finally getting some love here. All right, so moving back here. Next up, we have Texas State. All right, Texas State. We talked about them at the very beginning of this stream just a little bit. Out of the Sun Belt, why can they make it? All right, so first off, Jordan McLeod. Basically, if you don't know, Jordan McLeod played at James Madison last year. He was the Sun Belt Offensive Player of the Year. Quarterback, transferred over to Texas State this year, left James Madison like everybody did. So Texas State, think of what they had last year. They bring a lot of that roster back. They lost their quarterback, TJ Finley, but they replace him with the offensive player of the year in their own conference. So it's kind of an upgrade there. And with their schedule, there's really no reason they can't go undefeated. I think their toughest games probably UTSA. They avoid Appalachian State, and they might avoid James Madison. I can't remember. Let's look. Yeah, they avoid James Madison. So they play UTSA. They play Arizona State. They host both of those games, though, so that's going to be beneficial there. They play at Troy. Troy's kind of a question mark. They lost their head coach, John Summerall, to Tulane. So the jury's out on them. I think one of Notre Dame's coordinators is their new head coach or something. But with Jordan McLeod, with the running back they have, I think his name's Ishmael. He's pictured here. Their offense is going to be explosive. And then they actually bring in some nice transfer pieces on defense. Let me pull it up for you. See, they have the number one transfer portal class in the Sun Belt, number one. But looking at the defensive guys they bring in, all right, let me pull it up. Let's see. Linebacker from Houston, linebacker from Florida, D lineman from Michigan State, corner from Cincinnati, another D lineman from Houston. So as you can see, they're bringing in Power 4 talent on defense, okay, which is always beneficial, let alone in the Sun Belt, which is kind of usually up for grabs, I would say. And then with avoiding Appalachian State, that is to their benefit, no doubt, because I would say Appalachian State's probably the team to beat in this conference. But with avoiding them, you've got a nice schedule in its own right. So if they can beat UTSA, they're probably going to beat Arizona State. Arizona State's pretty bad. If they can win these two games right here, they're probably going undefeated. So now this would be, think back to like Liberty's schedule last year. Yeah, they go undefeated, but they probably don't play anybody. You know what I mean? All right, Scotty, UTSA and Texas State both lose their coaches to the Big 12 next year. I agree. I would say Texas State's coach probably goes to Baylor is going to be my guess. UTSA, I think he might go to Arkansas. I might be wrong, but I don't know, though. That's my guess, because I think he was he might have been a coordinator there before, or like special teams coordinator or something. All right. Going back to your guys' list real quick, I will do a page, and we'll go back again. All right, Moff. Okay, speaking of Texas State, Appalachian State and Texas State will both be undefeated when they play each other in the Sun Belt. The winner gets in. All right, so that's not – now, Appalachian State, I don't know if they'll go undefeated because they've got a pretty tough schedule. That would mean they're beating Clemson, but he probably means in the conference. So that one I can definitely see. If they're both undefeated in conference play, you've got Appalachian State with one loss against Clemson and a win over Liberty in this case. I could see the winner of that getting in for sure. Because with Texas State, like I said, it's kind of like Liberty last year. They're undefeated, but they didn't play anybody. So will they get in over a team with a loss? It's just going to depend on the committee. We got a long one here. All right, so Pop. All right. All right, Pop says, I think Memphis has the best shot. Boise, I can also see the other is Tulane, since even though they're rebuilding, they still could have a great season. So Memphis, Boise, and Tulane are a pretty good bet, I would say. They're kind of towards the top, definitely in the top 5 as far as, who can make it is concerned. Silverfield might get stolen away by Arkansas. That's true. That's true. He might be gone after this year. I figure he's waiting out Seth Hennigan's run. Probably be my guess. Usually they'll kind of wait out their run with the talent they have before they jump ship, All right, here we go. Moving back to my list. Next up we have, speaking of Tulane. But I have to move on to the water. I'm running out of coffee over here. All right, so why Tulane? All right, out of the American, they've got Mekhi Hughes and Ty Thompson. So that is their backfield right there. Running back Mekhi Hughes, arguably a top 10 running back in the country. Then Ty Thompson, you may have heard that name before. He's been at Oregon. He's been a backup there. So they have a pretty good portal class. Now, like I said, they have question marks as far as Willie Fritz is gone. All right, their head coach, he's gone to Houston. They bring in John Summerall from Troy. Troy has been good, though, so John Summerall has kind of a track record that he can win. He hasn't coached long head coach wise, but he has been successful when he's been at Troy. All right, their toughest games this year: Kansas State, at Oklahoma, and Memphis. Okay, so they play a tough non-con. All right, Kansas State and Oklahoma, arguably top 25 teams there. Now, for some reason, like I said, they host Kansas State. That's kind of weird there. Uh, they could be Kansas State. I don't know if it's going to happen, but that would definitely look good if they could. We'll look at their schedule here in a minute. But Memphis also, at least they host them. Memphis kind of got screwed on that because they play all the tough teams away. So that's going to be difficult for them. Tulane definitely benefits from hosting that game. All right, transfer portal wise, they bring in a lot of guys from Troy with John Summerall, but in addition to that, I've got, let's see, a guard from Georgia Tech, tight end from Indiana, wide receiver from LSU, guard from A&M, Utah wide receiver. So again, they're loading up on power guys. Alabama wide receiver, Troy guys coming with him, a USC receiver. So basically, all these receivers they're bringing in are Power 4, Power 5 guys. But Ty Thompson is kind of the question mark here at quarterback coming over from Oregon. Because if he can hit, they're going to be able to put up some nice points. If they can have Ty Thompson, if they can have Mekhi Hughes in that backfield, that's going to be pretty nasty. All right, now let's look at their schedule real fast. All right, so Kansas State and Oklahoma back-to-back is going to be tough. All right. At least they host Kansas State, but playing at Oklahoma, that's going to be rough right there. Now, I think Oklahoma is going to take a step back this year. You know, they lose Dylan Gabriel. As Kansas State loses Will Howard too, but they've got Avery Johnson. But with the rest of the conference, I mean, they host South Florida, they host Memphis, so that's going to be beneficial to them. So really, it's going to be these two games right here. And really, if they can split those games, if they can go 50-50 in these games, that's going to look good on the resume. If they can somehow beat South Florida and Memphis and then lose to either Kansas State or Oklahoma, that's a win. All right, here, let's see. All right. LA says the Tulane still have their head coach. If so, they have a chance. So we just touched on that. They don't actually have their head coach. All right, he left to go to Houston. If so, they have a chance along with Boise State and Memphis. So Boise State and Memphis is who LA is throwing out here. All right, and they're both on my list, so they're definitely in the top 5. All right, IE says UTSA of the American Conference, birds up. So he's got UTSA going. All right, UTSA, a team I think we'll talk about here in a minute. They were the one I was kind of 50-50 on because I kind of thought they might make it, but at the same time, they lose a lot from what they've had success with these past few years. All right, Warren says I'll say Memphis, Tulane, and Boise State. All right, Jackson says nope, they don't. First year for new coach, maybe freshman year. All right, talking about Tulane. Yeah, they're going to struggle a little bit, you know, making that change. Sometimes you struggle out of the gate, I would say. So playing Kansas State and Oklahoma early is going to be tough because I think they'll be fine in the long run because he's a good head coach. But sometimes making that jump right off the bat, they can struggle in like week 1, you know. All right, next up, UNLV. All right, so UNLV out of the Mountain West Conference. We talked about that a little earlier. Fresno State, Boise State. All right, so why UNLV? All right, Ricky White, pictured here, one of the best receivers in the country. All right, he's going to put up All-American level numbers. I think he was on my preseason All-American list, if I remember correctly. They also bring a lot of Power 4 transfers on defense. So basically on offense, they return everything but their quarterback. And we'll look at that here in a minute. They bring in kind of a bunch of quarterbacks to kind of throw a dart at a wall, you know, and see which one sticks kind of. They bring in a guy, Matthew Sluka, out of Holy Cross. And their head coach is the new James Madison coach, by the way. But I think he won like FCS Player of the Year, if I remember correctly. So he's probably going to win the job. He's going to air it out to Ricky White. That offense is going to be nasty. But again, with what they bring in on defense, and Barry Odom is their head coach, formerly in Missouri. You can probably remember him. Toughest games-wise, you've got at Kansas. Kansas is going to be pretty good with Daniels. Syracuse, they're playing Kyle McCord. They should be improved as well, talking about Syracuse. And then they've got Boise State. So they host Boise State. That's going to help them out a little bit there. But again, with the Mountain West, it's kind of up for grabs, I think, as well as the American. All right, Victor says Boise State, Memphis, Liberty are all the favorites, but don't sleep on Texas State. They could easily become a surprise team and grab the spot. I agree, Victor. We just talked about them about probably 5 minutes ago. We just talked about Texas State. I think their schedule is really good. Adding Jordan McLeod, that offense is going to be nice. So definitely could see Texas State making a run. All right, so let's look at these transfers for UNLV. All right, so number one recruit, not recruiting, transfer portal class in the Mountain West Conference, first off. All right, and then defensively, what they've got coming in. All right, you got a safety from Oregon. That's going to be nice right there. All right, so a corner from UCF, a corner from Arkansas, corner from A&M. So you can already tell they're loading up that secondary, which is a main spot they had question marks with Power 4, Power 5 talent. Wide receiver Casey Kane from Texas, got a safety from Arkansas, safety from Texas, linebacker from Arkansas, running back from NC State, tight end from Kansas State, edge rusher from Oregon. So as you can tell, that defense is going to be improved is what I'm getting at here. If they can just find one of these quarterbacks to hit, whether it's Matthew Sluka, whoever, this is the one I was talking about here, whoever it is at quarterback, if they can find one of them that'll hit, they should have a chance to kind of be the team. All right, so let me pull up their schedule here. All right, so they got actually, let's look at their schedule last year first off. All right, so last year lost to Michigan. All right, 35-7. They beat Vanderbilt. All right, so Vanderbilt's not very good, but that's still an SEC win nonetheless. Let's see. Mountain West wise, lost to Fresno, San Jose State, and Boise State. So Boise State did beat them pretty handily, and they lost to Kansas in the bowl game. But this year they've got Houston. I think they should be able to beat Houston. Houston, they've got a new coach, so we'll see how they are. Utah Tech, they'll beat them. And then at Kansas and Syracuse, these are the two games I want to watch. In particular, this 3-game stretch with Fresno included is going to be tough. Kansas, they should be a top 25 team this year with Daniels as long as he can stay healthy. Will he still be healthy by that game? You know, who knows? He gets hurt a lot. Fresno State, we talked about them earlier. Their offense is going to be good, as well as their defense probably. Syracuse, they should be improved. Along with Kyle McCord, they're bringing a lot of transfers. Their new head coach, Fran Brown from Georgia, actually a pretty good head coach, I think he's going to be. This is his first head coaching job, but like a few years ago, he was considered to be the number one recruiter in the nation. So I think they're going to be improved somewhat. And then let's see, Boise State, at Oregon State, San Jose State, I think will take a step back. So, you know, with them playing these power conference teams, that could benefit their schedule. If they can beat Boise State, they could have a nice resume towards the end. All right, here we don't got too many more of your guys. Let's see. Oh, we got a long one here. All right. All right, let's see. Memphis won 10 games last year, has a 4-year starter returning at quarterback, has the same head coach, and was one of the only 2 G5 teams to beat a Power 5 team in a bowl game where they held Iowa State to 0 rushing yards. They have a lot of returning weapons from last year. They beat Boise State last year. Not that that has much to do with this year, but my money is on a team with a proven quarterback versus one potential. All right, so he's saying basically Delmore Boise, that's GR, and he's saying he would go with Memphis strictly off of proven quarterback play. So a lot of people have actually touched on that in the comments that they're going with proven quarterback play, guys that have been there, guys that have won a lot of games before, guys that have proven they can play over, you know, Tulane's quarterback, over Boise State's quarterback, that have been backups but have potential. All right, Jackson says, don't sleep on Texas State. Might be going to the American Conference soon after Memphis, Tulane, and USF leave for new conference. Hopefully by the end of the year or earlier. Yeah, we'll see, man. With the way it's headed as far as, you know, realignment is concerned, ain't no telling who's going to go where. See, Memphis new AD wants either Big 12 or ACC and knows what's going on in both. Yeah, I'm really surprised Memphis has been left out of the party this long. I mean, backtrack to a few years ago, back when Big 12 was recruiting, like they actually, you know, I think they got a meeting with the Big 12 to kind of present why they should be in the Big 12, and they got left out when like Houston and Central Florida came in. What's a FSU? I'm assuming we're talking about Florida State, but I don't remember. All right, Victor. I think Liberty goes 13-0 again, but they won't make it because of their weak schedule. Instead of a 10 team that played Power Four teams, excuse me, like Tulane will get in. It'll be similar to the FSU situation. Oh, my bad. The comment just hadn't popped up over here earlier. Similar to the FSU, Florida State situation last year. Yeah, I mean, with them, yeah, I can see that. And that's kind of what I was touching on at the beginning. To where, like, could them making Liberty, talking about Liberty, could them making the Fiesta Bowl last year and getting kind of beat up end up hurting their chances this year, because, you know, there's they lost to them, showed that they didn't deserve, I won't say deserve to be there, but showed they couldn't play with those teams. So are they going to give somebody a different, a chance? And that's kind of what I've been touching on with a lot of these teams is like if they can play with these Power Four teams they're playing in the non-con, like not even beat them, but keep it within 20, probably keep it within 3 scores. I think that's kind of it looks good on the resume. If, Appalachian State, for example, let's say that, well, actually, hold on. Let's say Appalachian State plays with Clemson, but loses to them. Technically, that looks good if Clemson makes the playoff in the long run. All right, I don't remember how many more teams we have here. This might be the last one. All right, UTSA. All right, so this is my next one. I had them off the list until the last minute. I decided to throw them in here. So out of the American, why could they make it? Jeff Traylor, number one. All right, their head coach. He's proven he can win a lot now. When he has won in the past, that's been with Frank Harris. Like they lose a lot of the roster that's been with him throughout this run, but they bring in a lot of nice pieces from the portal that should benefit this team this year, to where they can have some success right away coming to UTSA. All right, toughest games they play. A lot of teams we've already talked about at Texas State, at Texas, and then Memphis. So for them to make it, all right, we're going to assume they're going to lose to Texas probably. They would have to run the gauntlet in the American Conference and beat Texas State. None of those are easy by any means. And with them, I think they're talented enough with the portal guys they brought in, but they're going to need to find a quarterback that can play right away to really benefit this team. Let me pull up their transfer portal class for you, though, because we kind of got to look at that because they almost lose their entire team that they've had lately. Let's see here. All right, UTSA. They bring in a lot of guys on defense in particular. All right, Blackshire from Texas. You got safety from Stanford. Linebacker from Alabama. Corner from LSU. So, I mean, they've got guys coming in. DJ Allen, wide receiver from TCU, wide receiver from Tech. Let's see, lineman from Rutgers. So they're bringing in guys that can contribute right away. But with that schedule, we already talked about how good they're going to be as far as Memphis and Texas State is concerned. So with everybody else, they have to play as well. Texas, they're probably losing that one. They're probably not going to beat. They might beat Texas State, but I don't think so. East Carolina's going to be tough. We talked about them. Rice is going to be tough. FAU with Tom Herman, who knows what they're capable of. Then Memphis, So it's a stretch, but I mean, it is possible, Jackson says Memphis 13-0. It is a stretch. I agree, but I don't think it's impossible. I think they can definitely play with Florida State. And the good news for them is they probably don't have to beat Florida State to still make it look like a good resume point. If they can just keep it fairly competitive with Florida State, they should be okay. All right, I don't think we got too many more comments here. All right, Turtle says Boise State. All right, so Boise State getting some love here. And again, Boise, kind of we talked about earlier, like how quickly can they make that jump with with the new quarterback, the kind of the jury's out on. All right, Tim says USF wins the American. So yeah, USF hasn't got a lot of love in these comments, which is kind of surprising because I figured they would get a little more considering they played with Alabama last year. And with 18 starters back, I think that definitely benefits them. All right, here we go. All right, Owen, I think this is the last one. Owen says USF has a top 3 offense in college football. They win the American, and Byron Brown is considered one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So this one, it came from my bold predictions. He entered this comment after I'd already done the bold prediction video. So I just went ahead and put it on this one because it was talking about South Florida. But top 3 offense in college football, that's going to be maybe a stretch, but that was his bold predictions. Now, winning the American, I think that's possible. And then Byron Brown, he could be a top 10 quarterback by the end of the country. I wouldn't be shocked at that one. All right, Jackson says, nope, Tulane or Memphis. All right. Yeah, I think it's probably coming out of the American as far as the G5 representative, but the Sun Belt, I wouldn't be shocked either if they could somehow get somebody in, whether it's Texas State, whether it's Appalachian State, whoever. All right, Victor, Tulane can definitely hang with Power Four teams. Over the last 3 years, they beat Kansas State and USC and barely lost to teams like Ole Miss and Oklahoma. And like Jackson said, they do have a new coach. So will that throw them off? You know, I don't think it will in the long run, but that's kind of like what I was saying earlier is how quickly can he get this team? Now, obviously, he's had the offseason to get them together, but like John Summerall's won a lot of games, their new head coach, but how quickly can he do it is the question. And with them losing Michael Pratt to the pros, how is Ty Thompson going to look at quarterback? If Ty Thompson can hit, they're going to be okay because I think, like Victor said, they've proven before that they have a roster that can hang with the big boys. All right, and Jackson says Appalachian State. Yeah, I agree. Appalachian State, I think, is talented, but their schedule's tough. All right, and again, these responses from everybody we looked at, courtesy of Bleacher Report, Twitter, email, and then the comments in the community. If you want to be a part of the next one, or whenever I put out something in the community on Bleacher Report on Twitter, whatever, just respond to it, and you can get your input in there. You'd be part of this list, right here. But all right, so those are my G5 teams that can make the college football playoff. To recap, let's go through them real quick. No particular order: UTSA, UNLV, Tulane, Texas State, South Florida, Miami of Ohio, Memphis, Liberty, Fresno State, East Carolina, Boise State, and Appalachian State. And then to reminder, in case you missed it at the beginning, these were the polls we did on Twitter. I asked which conference gets somebody in. 33%. There was a three-way tie. Some of the Mountain West didn't get any votes, but three-way tie: American, Sunbelt, Conference USA, and the MAC. And then in the community tab, I asked you guys who gets in. All right. Mountain West had the lead at 44%. All right. And that's Boise State. Second place, the American Conference, 30%. Third place, Conference USA or the MAC. So that's Liberty or Miami of Ohio, 15%. And then 10% with the Sun Belt. All right. So we're done with talking to G5 teams now as far as mine. All right. So if you guys got any questions or anything you want to talk about, it can be college football related. It can be G5 related. It can be whatever the heck you want. Drop anything in the comment section and we'll talk about it because I can talk to whenever, but go ahead and drop your comments if you got any now and we'll talk about them. All right. So Victor says this is off topic. Excuse me. Can't talk. But former G5 team SMU has a chance to make the playoffs their first year. I agree, man, which is kind of surprising. You don't really think of that when teams are, going from a group of five conference, to a Power Five conference. But, with the talent they already had, they bring back the quarterback, Preston Stone, and they brought in a lot of dudes transfer portal wise to where I agree. I think they're a top 10 team for sure not in the nation, in the ACC. Like, I think number one, that conference is up for grabs. Number two, I think they can make a run. I think I had them. I did my power rankings on them not so long ago. I can't remember where I had them. I have to look. All right, let me look actually. Because I did a tier list power ranking not too long ago. See if I can find it. All right, here we go. This is my ACC one right here. Let me try to mute. All right, so let's look at this real quick, and then we'll get out of here. If y'all got any more questions, though, guys, like I said, throw them in the comment section, and then I'll discuss them. Then we'll get out of here. All right, so SMU, I really can't remember what I said about them. Let's see. See if y'all can hear this. All right, so I put them in contenders. Okay, so I have SMU as a contender in the ACC. I think it's definitely possible that they can contend in the ACC, along with obviously those teams. Clemson, Florida State, Louisville, Miami, NC State. I think are all contenders. Virginia Tech and Syracuse might could sneak in there, but those are the teams I would say are definitely contenders. All right, guys, but that is going to do it for tonight. Those are my G5 teams that can make the college football playoff. Thanks for watching. If you're watching live, if you're watching on replay, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'll try to put out a new one fairly soon. I'll try to get the stream fixed where there's less lag next time, hopefully. But this might be my last live for the week probably, but I'll try to do another one possibly soon. But I'll try to put out some more videos this week. But thanks for watching, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Who are the G5 teams that you think can make the college football playoff? Let me know down in the comment section. Make sure to like this video and subscribe.